Guys, it is nearly 2025, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the biggest lessons that I've learned in business in 2024. And it has definitely been a big year of growth. I learned all these lessons the hard way. If it wasn't hard, then I literally wouldn't learn. And every year, it's basically the same thing. But this year in particular, there were a few good lessons. So I thought I would just go into them on video. Hopefully this helps you guys for next year. It's definitely going to help me for next year and every year beyond that. So I'm always thankful that these lessons have been learned, but they're pretty painful to go through at the time. If you're wondering who I am, my name's Erica. I run a small business called Big Cat Creative, where we sell Squarespace templates and we create resources for people wanting to DIY design and websites in their businesses. I've been in business for about 7.5 years, coming on 8 years, and we have a small remote team. I'm going to talk quite a bit about the team today because that was some of the biggest hurdles this year, but just to give you some context, that's who I am. That's what I do. You probably already know who I am if you're watching this video anyway, so let's get into it. Okay, first, biggest lesson is all around hiring a team. This was definitely the thing that comes top of mind when I think about the struggles of 2024. And I definitely think it's early days, but struggles that I've overcome. Hiring is definitely one of those areas that I just had no experience in. I started this business as like a solo venture and never planned to have a team. I love having a team now, but it's definitely been a bumpy ride to get here to a good place. I'm a creative at heart. I'm not a businessy person. I never studied anything to do with business, never wanted to own a business, never thought I would own a business. And so you can imagine why getting to having a team and managing a team and hiring the right sort of people has been a bit of a struggle. So my number one lesson is that hiring great people takes a lot of time. I actually had 2 pretty major hiring fails this year, and it just solidified the lesson that it takes a lot of time to hire the right sort of people. And when you try to bypass that, every single time I've tried to bypass putting in the work to hire someone, it's ended up in a big failure. This year in particular, thousands of dollars lost, so much time spent on the wrong people, and totally my fault, and the lessons learned. So within that, I learned that there's 2 parts to hiring great people. Number one is that they have to be the right sort of person. And to find the right sort of person for the role, you need to know what kind of person you want or what kind of person you need. Everyone's definition for what that person looks like is going to be different. It depends who you are, what the rest of your team is like, what sort of soft skills you need to fit in with that specific role and with the rest of your team dynamic or working directly with you. And then the second thing is be right for the actual role. So they need those hard skills as well. This stuff might seem super obvious on the surface. If you're good at hiring, you're probably like, duh. But if you've got no idea how to hire people in your small business, I feel like some of these tips will be pretty helpful. So to find the right person for the role, you need to know exactly what that role is. And sometimes you can just jump into hiring because you need someone to help you. But if you don't sit down and like really define what exactly it is that you need, then you're probably going to hire the wrong person. So this year, those 2 mistakes I made, the first one was that I hired the right sort of person with all the right soft skills. It would have been a great fit for the team, but was not a good fit for the actual role that I needed. And I didn't know that until that person was basically onboarded and in the business and we started working together. That was my fault for not figuring out exactly what I needed in terms of the actual jobs that person would be doing and how they're contributing to the business. And then the second fail I had was the opposite. I hired the person that had all of the hard skills on paper, but then when they came into the business, they just weren't the right sort of person for the role, and it just wasn't a good fit with the team. So how do you actually make sure you get those 2 things? It's a lot harder said than done because obviously those 2 things seem pretty obvious. But once I actually sat down this year and got really clear on those things before I started hiring again, I realized how much work it is and how long it takes. So the first thing is you want to really define that role. So sit down and just start writing out exactly what you want that person to fill. You might not 100% know, but you need to get as clear as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to hire. Now, in the future, that role probably will adapt. If you've got the right sort of person, it's likely that it'll adapt as you work with the person. But I think getting as clear as possible before you start hiring is really important because if you don't know how that person is going to fit in with the rest of everything else that's going on in your business, it's likely that they're just not going to fit at all and it's not going to work. You might have other team members that it's going to affect. You need to figure out exactly what that person's going to be doing day to day, what they're responsible for, write out a really comprehensive role outline, KPIs. Also consider creating an org chart if you have other team members already so you can figure out how everyone's going to fit together. And once you sit down and start doing this, I recommend doing this first because you'll realize like, oh, actually what I thought I needed, I actually need something completely different. So it's really important to do this because I found when I actually sat down and took this really seriously, I ended up in the process rearranging a bunch of other team members into different roles, solidifying their roles in the process, and actually tweaking what I thought I needed and changing the role to something different. So definitely do this before you start the hiring process. The second thing is getting that right sort of person. Try and get really clear on this before you start hiring too, because as soon as you start receiving applications for your role, you need to be assessing applications to try and figure out if these are the right sort of people that you're looking for. So what kind of qualities do you want in this person? How do you want them to fit with the other team? How do you want them to work? Are they going to be working more with you, or are they going to be more independent? Because those are going to be different sort of personality traits or soft skills that you're looking for. Think about what's actually required for the role that you're looking for and the skills there, and then what sort of personality traits are going to go hand in hand with that to make it successful. The reality is that pretty much everyone is going to say that they're hardworking, they're detail-oriented, they are great at working by themselves, they're super good at what they do, but the reality is that not everyone is all of those things. That's fine, that's normal. People exaggerate a bit on applications, and so they should. But it makes the application and interview process a little bit like detective work. You have to really read between the lines of what people are telling you, and unfortunately this part does take quite a bit of work. Just because someone says they're something or says they're good at something, it's hard to judge that from just one application and just one interview. And I think to get a really good gauge on what someone's like, you need to have some sort of communication with them, go back and forth a little bit, whether that's doing multiple interviews, test project, emailing them, even just back and forth a bit. So there is quite a lot of work involved in this because it's really pretty much impossible to tell what someone is like from one application or even one short interview. So I'm not going to go into the entire process that we followed. If you guys are interested, maybe I will in the future, but it was huge. It took a huge portion of my year just to learn these lessons, figure out how to do it right, and then do it right. First, you need to do all that solidifying of the role and figuring out what sort of person you need. Then it's getting a good job application together. Then it's distributing it as far as you possibly can so you can get as many possible applications as you can, because the more you get, the more likely you are to find that right person. Then you've got to go through all those applications. I think we received over 300, so hours and hours of going through applications and reading between the lines and trying to figure out who might seem like they have the skills and they have the right personality, which is really hard to do over email. So a lot of those emails turned into short interviews, and then those interviews turned into secondary interviews and test projects. And then once we finally found the right person, in our case, we actually ended up hiring 2 people because we found 2 amazing people, which was really great and exciting. And I'm so happy that we have them. But then it's months and months of onboarding and getting them up to scratch with what's going on in your business. So a very, very long time. It is also mentally exhausting, particularly communicating with so many people that want to work for you, and you have to tell hundreds of them that they can't. And I don't know, that's mentally taxing, especially if you've had an interview with them and they're really nice people. Like I interviewed so many awesome people, and that was just a bummer having to say no to a ton of people because they weren't perfectly the right fit. And that's just normal. It's just tiring, and it took a long time. But as you can imagine, that was a huge learning curve for me, and my business is going to be a million times better for it. I now am ending the year with a dream team, and I'm super, super excited about the new hires this year. The hiring fails feel like a distant memory, though if you were to ask me if I wanted to hire anyone again anytime soon, or honestly ever, I would say no. I don't want to do it. Okay, my second lesson is that if I want to scale, particularly now I have a team, I have to let go of perfectionism, and I cannot micromanage everything. I know I always hear like the business gurus talk about putting perfectionism aside because you literally cannot micromanage everything that goes out if you have a team, if you're trying to scale. And I've always thought like, yeah, it's fine. Like I don't micromanage everything. But now I'm like really going into another step of just letting things go, letting other people handle things. And I think a while ago, I came to the acceptance that not everything is going to be looked over by me. Not everything is going to be exactly how I would do it. Things are going to be made by other people, and that's fine. It's never going to be exactly how you do it. But particularly this year, having a bigger team than ever, it's just become really more apparent that I do have my fingers in too many pies, and I need to just let go even more. And I need to constantly keep in mind that like when I'm reviewing something or checking something and tweaking something, and keep checking in with myself and being like, do you actually need to be reviewing this? And is what you're tweaking and changing actually going to make a difference to the big picture? So I'm trying to constantly be super aware of things that I'm doing. And I've been getting better at that, especially now that the new team members are more onboarded. We're a few months down the line and things are getting way more seamless and everyone is way more in touch with what's going on in the business and what things should be like. And so it's getting easier and easier. So I think a couple of things with letting go so you can scale are that you need to have really good systems. And I've been a systems person for a long time, but this year, again, this has just solidified the fact that systems are so important when you have a team, even more than it already was. If you have systems set up, SOPs, guides, trainings, everything that can be repeated in your business, have a system for it. And then it's so much easier to one, onboard new stuff and also have people manage their own projects, self-manage their tasks, and be able to audit and check what they're doing themselves without you having to check everything. So systems are really important. The other thing is, I think it's important to keep in mind that if you are constantly checking everyone's stuff, then you're actually doing that team member a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice because you're never going to allow them to be able to learn and check things themselves. And there's a way to sort of review or keep an eye on what's going on and make it more of a learning process for them rather than just taking over it and having your hands on it before it goes out. So now I'm trying to look at every sort of review or thing that I maybe want to change or that isn't up to my standards as a learning process, and also making sure to build those standards into the systems so that it's not just something you tell someone once it's in writing and it's a part of a system, then it's something that one, everyone remembers is a standard, and two, is just easily accessible and it's part of the process. So really trying to empower people more to make their own decisions, audit their own stuff, and be able to decide if it's up to standard or not by the use of not micromanaging everything, letting them try and think for themselves as much as possible, and doing your best to document all of your expectations and standards so that between those two things, they should be empowered to think on their own and make their own decisions, and you should feel confident to not have to check everything as it goes out or, whatever you're doing that's too micromanagey. Okay, third lesson is that some ideas are going to flop, and that's fine. And I've always known this, and this is not really something that I wouldn't think it rocked me this year, but it's definitely something worth mentioning. And I know that for some people, this would have bothered them more. So in 2023, we launched what we called Build Your Own Squarespace templates. And they basically were just a more advanced version, I guess, of our Squarespace templates. And you could pretty much pick and choose your pages. We had options for different color palettes, different fonts. And when I first saw this idea, I was super, super excited about it. Unfortunately, it was quite a beast to build. There was a lot of tech involved, and we had to create a ton of different options for people to choose from. So even just to test it out, it was a lot of upfront work. And then about a year later, so about mid 2024, we decided we were actually going to retire it. So we gave it a year to test. I think that probably if we pushed it even harder, it would have done better. But the amount of upkeep and complication it brought into our business for the amount of sales that it was getting, it just really wasn't worth it. I just felt in my gut like it was just cluttering things up. We didn't need it. It wasn't helping people the way we thought it would. So we just retired it. And honestly, we felt pretty good about that decision. But if I had really thought about it, the amount of time and effort we put into it, we definitely didn't make that back. Creating those build your own templates definitely ended up being an expense. But I will say that we learned a ton when we were building them out, and we ended up morphing this year to a sort of add-on page system. Instead of completely building your own template, you get to choose from the templates that we already have and we already know people love and they work really well for people, and add on some extra additional pages if you want to. So the pros of the new system is that it's just much more simple. I think people understand it more, whereas the build your own template was pretty confusing unless you knew a little bit about websites and what you were doing. While we were building those, we had to figure out all this tech to make it work. And because we did all that, it was really easy for us to implement this new sort of more scaled back, simple version with the add-on pages. There was definitely lots of good things learned in that process. If I think about it too long, like I said, we lost a lot of time and we lost a lot of money building that system, but it's business. This is just what happens. You got to test things out, and that's why it's so much fun. It's always a bit of a risk to see if something's going to work, and not everything you try is going to work, and that's totally fun. So I guess the biggest takeaway here is that if there is something in your business that isn't working, don't hold on to it just because you're emotionally invested or just because you put lots of time into it. If it's creating complication for you in your business and it's not bringing anything, joy, money, or fulfillment to your business, then don't be afraid to just let it go. There's always more ideas. There's always other things you can try. Just don't white knuckle something if it's not working. Okay, my last lesson this year, number 4, is that having business friends are worth their weight in gold. So this year, obviously, we had a few lessons to go through, particularly the team hiring stuff was pretty crazy. And I really reached out to my network and got so much good advice. The only reason I learned all of those lessons with hiring, I talked to so many of my business friends. Shout out to Paige Brunton in particular. She really helped me through this one. Every one of them gave me like a couple of bits of advice that were just like light switches for me. And man, you should see my notes of all the people I talked to and all of the good tips I got. And I compiled those into this incredible hiring process, and it worked really well. But also, not only that, it was like just the moral support that they were giving me along the way was super, super invaluable and kept me a little bit sane during that entire process, to be honest. And it's not just about what I learned from the hiring round as well. The rest of the year, I just had so many good conversations with business friends. There really is nothing like having people that you can talk to who are in similar business situations that you are. Normal friends are great, but they just don't get it when it comes to what it's like to run a business or whatever industry you're in. I just recommend finding people that are in a similar place, because wherever you are, it's probably quite unique. And so having people to talk to about it is just super important. You don't really realize how much you need it or how helpful it can be until you sit down and start talking to someone, I think. And pretty much the biggest things that have helped me overcome challenges, or the biggest lessons I've learned, or the most information I've learned from people, are just through those super candid conversations with business friends. So if you don't have any friends that are like in your industry or work in a similar business to you, I definitely recommend trying to find some. And it's actually not that hard. All of the friends that I've found in my industry, I'm pretty sure they just come from like Instagram DMs and just starting up conversations with people on social media. Most people are super open to it. I don't know what your industry is, but in my industry, everyone's pretty open and willing to make friends. So I hope yours is the same, because it's super important and really helpful and can really help you get out of your ruts and learn some big lessons. So that's pretty much it. That was my 2024. There was so much more, but this year seriously just flew by, partially because I felt like I spent half of it hiring, but I'm super, super excited for 2025 now, particularly because I have this super solid team. So I'm really excited to see where we go next year. I would love to know what your biggest lessons were, or if yours were in any way similar to mine, or if mine spoke to you at all. Definitely comment down below. I'd love to chat about it. That's it from me. Cheers to a hopefully good 2024 for you too, and an even better 2025.